what I know a little bit about Raman sir personally is you have had a very, very unique career profile. It's so unique that I have not met anybody else with something similar, where you went from being a army personnel to a motivational speaker and a full-fledged corporate leadership coach nowadays. So you're leaving I would say, you have lived the full dynamic range of anybody's life, Raman. I mean, that is coming from me, but it will be a great honor. So if you can tell a little bit about, how it all started, how you managed to get into army, what it took to get into becoming an armed person, and how does it feel now that you're out of the army and you're living a civilian's life, helping people becoming better leaders?
Firstly, thanks a ton for a very, flowery introduction. I think I've asked this question several times, and I wish I could give an answer that it was all strategy and planning and all of that. I think a lot of it was happenstance. I, like many other young people at my age in the 80s, didn't really have that many options ahead of us. I mean, private sector hadn't really opened up, and you had maybe the classical, you become either the tier 1 is you apply for the civil services, and tier 2 is maybe, the other exams like CDS, bank probationary officers, assistant grade. I mean, that was the thinking. I'm not saying that tier 1 or tier 2, but that was the thinking. And of course, the CAT and FMS and all of that had just sort of come into our horizon, and that was another option. And of course, required a lot of competitive studies and all of that. There was a notion that we had when we were young college kids that in the army, padhai nahi karni padegi. So it was a notion that we had, and it would be like a lot of adventure and physical fitness and running around and all of that stuff. So, which of course is true, but that fact about you don't have to study or you don't have to learn is not true. I have some friends in the civil services who often joke with me and tell me that we give one exam in our life and after that we are set. And you give one exam and then you give another, then another, then another. So anyway, that's on a lighter vein. But that's how I kind of joined the army. And I was in the forces for about 12 years. And when I left to join the Mahindra Group. And then I was with the Mahindra Group for 12 years. In that, I started out in a institution called the Mahindra United World College. That's where I sort of joined the organization, and then I was the CEO of 3 of the companies of the Mahindra Group. One was a company called now it's called First Choice. Those days it was called Automart India. After that was a company called Mahindra Special Services Group. This was a company consulting firm that focused on information security. Information security in the 2000s was just beginning to become an issue, and online transactions and all was starting. Credit card was being used, beginning to be used, and all of that. So information security was a major concern at that point of time. And then there was a joint venture that was formed between Mahindra and British Aerospace. It's called the Mahindra Defence Systems, and I moved as a CEO there. And then, of course, 2611 happened, and post 2611, as you might be aware, several institutions were built. NIA was set up after that. The NatGrid was set up after that. So I moved back to the government in some sense to work with the government to set up the National Intelligence Grid, the NatGrid. Post that, I came back to the corporate sector, and I was with the Reliance Group for 5 years, almost 5 years, heading their risk and strategy, some parts of strategy and new ventures, risk, security, and new ventures. Those were the 3 areas that I was looking at. And last year, I decided that enough is enough, and I've been running for a fairly long time, and now I want to take a sabbatical. So when I took a sabbatical, the world decided to take a sabbatical. COVID happened simultaneously. And here's where we are. So,
I want to ask you something, kind of a different question. There's a phrase which I'm not sure if this is the right phrase, but कहते हैं आर्मी में जाना है, मतलब जब तक पड़ोसी का बच्चा जा रहा है तब तक अच्छा है, अपना बच्चा नहीं जाना चाहिए. So, how did your family react when you decided to join the army?
I think in the middle class, especially, the army is still a very coveted career. My mother is from Kerala and my father is from Karnataka. I have a much stronger leaning towards my mother's side of the family because that's where I grew up and all. And my grandfather was a circle inspector, circle as he used to be called those days in Kerala. So in my entire family, I was the only one who was in uniformed services, so to speak, I had a lot of prestige in the family, even though amongst the cousins, I'm the fifth in order of seniority in terms of age. But my clout in the family was disproportionate because my grandmother would always say, no, check with him once because he's a gazetted officer.
Yeah.
So I don't think that was a concern when I was joining the army. And to your statement, you're right. Matter of fact, I see the statement in many other ways. I see the statement many times. There's this huge discussion which starts that everybody in India should get 2 years of military, whatever, compulsory military training and all of that stuff. And I'm an advocate which is against that. For the simple reason that a lot of such people who advocate that everyone should go to the army or conscription should happen, I tell them that the army is not your finishing school. It's not some chatek coaching classes where you send your youth who are not otherwise disabled. What should happen in schools, what should happen in families, at homes, that is not happening, and you're not doing that. Now you want your kids to be sorted out by the army. I don't think it works that way. And we don't even have to go up to the army. I often ask those parents who advocate that all youth should go into the army. I say, why don't you send your children into NCC? Army, we'll talk about later. But every school, every district, every location has NCC. Send your kids to NCC. So if he goes to NCC or she goes to NCC for a few years and from there straight away goes to the army, that's a great way to do it. So even if they don't want to go to the army, let them go into the NCC and experience that life. So I think by and large, the armed forces is still a very, very coveted career. It has arguably lost a little bit of its esteem from the decades earlier. But I still think that the number of applicants who apply, good applicants, capable applicants, far outnumber the number of vacancies. So to that extent, I think it's always been, and I hope it will continue to be a service that is coveted.
Yeah, where I was coming from, Raghu sir, is there's this. I mean, it's something which I would say is always there on the table, which is life and death, right? I mean, at the moment one decides to join an army, the family is always worried that kal ko ladai chhid gayi to what happens, because then you are, of course, the entire country is at risk, but the people at the front line are the first fighters, right? So they are always the ones who take the first bullet.
So I'll tell you a story about this. This I had written in my book also. It was the opening story of my book, that when I was commissioned in 1987, my first posting was in Punjab, in a place called Sangrur. So in 87, Punjab was still a fairly hot place. There were still instances of, terrorists pulling out people from a bus and shooting them up and all of that. So it was kind of dicey. So when I was going, a lot of our relatives and friends and all, you're going to go to Punjab, wahan to bada dangerous hai, scene ye hai, wo hai, and all of that. So we have to go there and all. Anyway, I went there. And within about 5-6 months of living in Sangrur, I realized that it was absolute, and maybe because of the heavy military and police deployment or whatever, but it was absolutely safe. I mean, at night, sometimes when we'd be going in our Jeep and patrolling at 1 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night, we'll see a whole group of women, girls coming back from ladies Sangeet or Gidda, Shidda, whatever. It was that safe. So after a few months, I made some friends there. 6-7 months, I made some friends. Then I was going for my first annual leave. So when I went and met my friends, the locals there, that मैं छुट्टी जा रहा हूँ, कहाँ जा रहे हो छुट्टी? मैं दिल्ली जा रहा हूँ. अरे दिल्ली तो बड़ा डेंजर है, वहाँ तो बस में बम पड़ जाता है, वहाँ पे तो ये हो जाता है. So their perception was Delhi was a very dangerous place. बस आके मार देती है वहाँ पे, तो ये हो जाता है. So it's often, I have realized that when you go to that location, you are in that place, you realize that the perceptions, whatever they may be, of danger, of good stuff, bad stuff, everything is very different from what you perceive from a distance. And this is true, by the way, in not just the army, it's true even in leadership, it is true. Most organizations fail, in my mind. One of the major causes of failing is the distance between the people who are at the strategy level and what is happening on ground. This gap between their understanding is often what causes them to create plans which have very little relevance of what is happening on ground. And there's a huge disconnect between what they are planning and what is really happening on ground. Right. So I think that perception is there. that the army is an unsafe place, but as we have seen in the last few years, and somewhere I think I am a believer in destiny and serendipity, and I don't think anything happens without a reason. I mean, this is a belief I have. So if you have that kind of a mindset that it's okay, I mean, if you're destined to go, you will go. If you are not destined to go, you won't go. So I have seen in my own career, both in the military and outside, and I've spent about 38 years in the field of risk. I've seen that accidents and death and these kind of things, fatal injuries and all of that, they may have a slighter percentage in certain professions, but there is really no profession or no part of life, no day of life when you can walk out and feel that I'll be 100% safe. That is not a really a life worth living either. I mean,
and
100% safe.
Definitely, sir, because I mean, as they say, right? I mean, there's no guarantee whether you'll be coming back to home, even in traffic. So,
well, I don't mean it in that way. I don't mean it in that fatalistic way. I'm sure, like, all of us have at some point or time done some adventure activity, done some sports where you have signed an indemnity form. You have signed a form. If something happens to me, you are not to blame. Now, the very act of signing that form is a very stark reminder that you're making a choice where there is a risk. That risk can end up in a broken leg, or it can end up in a broken neck. All of those things can happen. But if you decide that I'm going to choose a path in my life which will have zero risk,
right,
then it is not life at all, because life, I mean, the risk and the reward, broader sense of the word, they go together, and you really cannot have any reward without having risk for it. So I guess that's the way to look at it.
So Raghu sir, I'm really keen on learning about more of what happens inside, let's say, when you're becoming an armed personnel, but before, in terms of how the lifestyle looks and everything else, because I think the people who will be sharing this video with are also very keen on learning the fitness, diet, a lot of these things. But before we go there, I just want to learn one more thing from you: is what does it take to get into army? Like, is there a specific set of skills, fitness level, which is required to get into?
You're focusing a lot on fitness, and I think I want to dispel a myth which a lot of people have, that to join the army you have to be exceptionally fit and all of that stuff. I don't think that's that's true.
Okay.
Of course, if you are physically very fit, it helps, but so let me answer your question. What is it that they're looking for? And then you'll understand. I think in the armed forces, like many other, professions, there is set sort of a template of leaders that they're looking at, especially at the entrance level. I mean, you look at an MBA, for example, and in MBA, they're looking at a certain cognitive skills. They're looking at certain expressive skills, certain communication skills. And those are the tests that are designed, whether it's a GMAT, CAT, SAT, all of these things, they are designed, whether it's an IIT entrance exam, they're designed to sift those kind of qualities. Similarly, the CDS, the Combined Defense Services exams and the interviews, they are designed to look for leadership qualities. They are designed to look for the ability to collaborate, the ability to work as a team, the ability to think out of the box. Those are the kind of skills that they're looking at. Physical fitness is something which is called a trainable skill. You can train a person to be physically fit, right? You cannot train a person to, I mean, you can maybe, but it's very, very laborious to train a person to think out of the box. Or you cannot literally, in many cases, train a person to have moral turpitude or not have moral turpitude. So there are many such kind of untrainable skills or skills that are very, very difficult to train. But physical fitness is not one of them. Physical fitness, I mean, basically, when you join the Indian Military Academy, there may be cadets who may be coming in with a very strong physical fitness background. And they may be coming who are basically very average, like any young person is. I mean, somebody who's playing a little bit of games, running around a little bit. And even the physical tests that are conducted in the SSB are not very difficult. I mean, there's some running, there's some rope climbing, there's some obstacle crossing and all of that, but which any able-bodied person can do. It's any able-bodied person in that age category definitely can do. So it's not so much on physical fitness. Of course, once you join the army, armed forces, I would say, and I'm saying uniformed forces, not even the armed forces, physical fitness is an important aspect of your profession, because you have to be physically fit to do soldiering, especially in certain arms where there is a lot of effort, and if you're posted in high altitude or the mountains where you'll be trekking for days together just to reach your post. So obviously physical fitness is a very important aspect. And that is reflected in the training also. In training, there is a significant amount of time that is spent in physical, what we call PT in the morning, which has many variants to it. There is a variant of, sort of physical exercises like push-ups, running, pull-ups, rope, and all that. Then there is agility exercises, which, sort of calisthenics that you do, horse, Roman rings, so many other things. Then there is endurance testing, where you have to put on your full battle pack and cover a distance in a certain given time with a weapon, as if you're going for a full combat load, as it's called. Right. You have long route marches, you have overnight marches to toughen up both physically and mentally. So one thing I am reasonably confident, and I think I say this not just with my experience, but several of my colleagues, and I've also been an instructor. Physical fitness is really not the Achilles heel. It is usually the mental resilience, the mental robustness, as it's called. Right. I've seen many physically fit people, especially in commando training and all, break because they were not mentally tough. So mental toughness is what they're looking for, and they know what they're looking for, and they know how to find it. So my recommendation to people, I always recommend this. Of course, there are anecdotal cases of people who have cleared the SSB in the 11th attempt and the 12th attempt. And of course, that can also happen because at that age, young women and men, they change a lot. They transform a lot. So as a person, when you're applying for the NDA, let's say, for example, you might be 16 years old or 17 years old. And when you apply for the OTA, you have the age limit of maybe about 25, 26. So obviously between 17 and 26, the person transforms quite a bit. So the SSB may have rejected you in 17, but may select you at the age of 24. And those cases apart, normally I have found that the SSB is very competent in finding the candidates with the right competencies. And to my mind, if a person attempts 2 to 3 times and doesn't get through, there's a very good chance that the person at that juncture in life does not have those qualities which the forces are looking at. So that's kind of a loose framework in a way. Right. They select.
Right. So Raghu sir, actually, you know what? So as a proper civilian, who has never been into, I would say, any army school or anything of that sort. I've been to gyms, I've been to running tracks, and similar to me, I think there are thousands of followers or users that we have who all fall into the same category. But one thing which fascinates me, and I believe a lot of people, is the fact that, behind that wall, let's say whether it's NDA or a training academy for any uniformed forces, what happens? And I'm not talking about the physical fitness aspect again, because as you covered well, this is something which is given. Uniform forces, if you're there, you're bound to fit. Long run, slope climbing, as you say, able-bodied. But what about this mental robustness thing you just brought up? That was very interesting, right? How? I know. Sorry, getting back to the before. You also talked about in the beginning that you've seen death and accidents and probably loss of limbs for people. A lot of these tragedies. There's so much to cope up with. So I'm sure there's a lot of mental hardening that goes beyond those also. What does it take? So what does it look like? If I were to understand as a layman, what is it that goes on to toughen people to kind of cope up with all these situations?
So, of course, this is a very, very broad method of pedagogy. So to toughen people, there are various ways to toughen people mentally.
Right.
One way, for example, is to subject your body to extreme trauma. So let's say you are sent, like in the commandos, you have a 40-kilometer route march. In that 40-kilometer route march, every human body will be subjected to extreme trauma, no matter how physically fit you are. Mm-hmm. Then it's a question of whether you are able to keep your resoluteness to continue despite that trauma. It always happens in running. If you're a runner, you know that you never fall. You always stop, right?
Right.
So if you stop, it means that the mind has won over the body.
Right.
Or one part of the mind, of course, at the end of the day, is the mind driving both body and mind. But if you stop, it means the exhaustion, the pain, the fatigue, the breathlessness, the gasping for air has made you stop. But if you fall down unconscious, of course, I'm painting an extreme example. If you fall down unconscious, that means that your mind has prevailed and your mind has said, but keep on going until you fall. I mean, that's so I'm drawing an extreme example. But one way to toughen the mind is also to toughen the body. When you set a goal, and so, for example, let's say somebody has decided, I'm just making it up as an example, has decided that I'm going to run 5 kilometers every day, come what may, rain, hell, high water, or whatever. And let's say what's happening in Delhi right now, temperature is -3, -4. Now, this person has a choice to make when she is in bed or he is in bed. Do I get up and go, or do I stay in bed? This is not physical toughness. This is mental toughness. Because fact of the matter, if you have to catch a flight, you will get out. You will get out at 3 o'clock in the morning. If there was an emergency, medical emergency, somebody needed an ambulance, you will get out. So it is not that your body cannot get out. You can get out.
Right.
But your mind is taking that choice. Ki, Chodo yaar, ye barish bahut kal karenge. We'll do it tomorrow. Now, one way of toughening the mind is also to set a discipline that come what may, this will happen. So that also toughens the mind. It makes, it's a bit like if you ever swum in cold water, the first jump is the one that you're scared about. Once you're inside and you splash around a little bit, it's okay. It becomes okay. So one way of toughening the mind is also by exposing the body to physical trauma.
Right.
The other way to toughen the mind is uncertainty. If you don't inform, like let's say in commandos, it's a very normal pedagogy method that they will never ever tell you what's going to happen in the next class.
Right.
So the next class could be a relaxed class. The next class could be unarmed combat. So at lunchtime, when there is food to eat, you don't know whether you should eat gorge yourself, to your full, because you may not get a meal for the next 2 occasions. Alternatively, it could well be possible that immediately after lunch you have unarmed combat, in which case you will vomit out everything that you have eaten, because you will be doing all sorts of monkey stuff. So now that uncertainty and the ability to adapt and work in an uncertain environment is also taught as mental trauma by creating an environment of uncertainty.
Right.
Just imagine if you were attending any training, let's say physical fitness training, let's say it was a workshop, 5-hour workshop, and you were given no inkling of what is the next exercise. No inkling at all. So let's say you were made to do 100, you were told, okay, do as many push-ups as you can. And somebody I can do 100 push-ups. You do 100 push-ups, the next exercise is rope. Your arms are totally fatigued. Now when you try to do the rope, otherwise you may have been able to climb the rope, but now you can't climb. So if that uncertainty is introduced, that also toughens the mind. And of course, a lot of toughness of mind also comes from the fact that you're not alone. You are as part of a team. And it's always, again, in training, it's seen that if you take the weak runners and you put them in the front of the squad, usually they will cover that distance in more or less good timing. But if they start straggling behind, then many of them will never ever be able to even pass, because once you start straggling, your resoluteness also goes. Now, interestingly, in all these 3 examples, nothing has changed with the body. The body is exactly the same.
Right.
It's the same body which a person is struggling with, or if you put him in ahead of the squad, then with the other people, come on, we'll do it. Tell them. With that, sort of cajoling and all, you're able to. So the body is exactly the same. It's only the toughness of the mind which is being shaped and which is being trained. Right. And also there are other training exercises like you have confidence building exercises in which you have to jump off, let's say, from a 16-meter or a 10-meter board into a pool, or you have to go through a house which has been lit with fire, or there's battle inoculation that is done where you have to crawl and there's machine gun fire that is happening on top of you. Live bullets are flying on top of you. So all of these elements, there's artillery shelling happening, explosion happening. So the battle inoculation is basically inoculating you to that kind of an environment to simulate as real as possible. Of course, in real war, the shells will be landing at you and bullets will be being fired at you, but they bring it as close to reality as possible. There are also, boxing is, for example, a sport that everyone has to do. It is not a choice, because it's a sport in which you are actually physically getting punched in the face. And it's one thing to fire a weapon from a distance, and another thing to actually do hand-to-hand close quarter combat, and even that element is so. Basically, the pedagogy is such that these elements of physical and mental toughness are sort of imbibed into each and every minute of the day, starting from the morning till the night, and even some what I would call not part of the syllabus toughening. There will be some element of the seniors, disciplining the juniors and all of that stuff, and usually a lot of it will happen with physical trauma, physical exercises, punishment exercises, punishment marches, route marches, this, that. So in a constant exposure to a traumatic environment and coming out at the other end victorious. This process is what hardens or sort of strengthens the mental robustness through physical fitness as well.
Right. I really like, sir, how you put everything into such lifelike stories, because even through many videos that I have watched on YouTube and everywhere else, you always bring out these stories. And similarly, here you mentioned two things, which is very interesting. One is you said when you are running and if you stop, or if you choose to continue, these both decisions are ultimately being taken by the mind. So ultimately, it's the mind which needs to be trained equally hard as you're training the body. And the second that you mentioned is amazing. I think I can relate to. Anybody can relate to it a lot. Is अगर आपको पता ही नहीं है कि if you don't know whether you're going to fight in the next hour or maybe you are going to trek 5 kilometers, तो आप खाओगे नहीं उतना. You're not going to eat like 2 medium pizzas or kuch bhi, whatever the food is available. You're always going to be ready. Ki matlab, next moment if fight is going to happen, I have to be ready for that. So I think that's a very, very great example and a way to kind of...
My example is actually slightly different. My example is you don't know. You don't know whether you're going to fight. You may not get food for the next 2 meals.
Yeah.
You have to decide whether I eat the pizza or not.
Yeah.
It's a smart choice. Let me eat the pizza. Agar ladai badai hoye to at the worst I'll have to vomit it out. But if I don't get a meal for the next 2 meals, then I won't get food anywhere. So you learn how to make choices between 2 bad choices, not a good choice and a bad choice.
Right.
That's easy. Between a right and a wrong is easy. It's between 2 wrongs when you have to decide that if I do this also, there will be a consequence which is not pleasant. And if I do this, consequence is not pleasant, but this is more unpleasant than this one. And that's the reason why you would choose that.
Yeah, that's amazing, Simon. Yeah, I think I missed that point, that it's between 2 bad choices and not the right and the wrong. I think it's between 2 bad choices.
When you don't know what's going to happen next, how do you know what is right and wrong?
Yeah, exactly.
If I tell you prepare for a vacation, you are going for 3 days. You can carry only 1 small suitcase. If I don't tell you whether it's Shimla or Kanyakumari, how can you prepare?
No, I won't be able to. I'll have to.
Now, with that limited information, you are thinking, okay, what do I need in both the instances?
Right.
In both instances, I need my toiletry, I need my undergarments, I need this, I need this, I need this. Could be possible that it will be very cold. Could also be possible that it will be in Cherrapunji where it is raining. It also could be possible that we'll be in the deserts. Also be possible that I'll be near hot places. So what is the garment that I need to carry now, which can be carried and will adapt to 2 or 3 places, or can be carried and can be layered one after the other, or can be carried and can be discarded in an eventuality that I don't want to use it. Now that frame of thinking is very different from the frame of thinking that most of us are used to, which is now not tell me where we are going. Mere pehle batao kahan ja rahe. Only then I can plan. Now, as COVID has taught us, pehle batao is not really the way life is going to be hereafter. I'll tell you a very interesting way to understand this. We keep talking about the VUCA world. The world has become uncertain. The world has become uncertain. I'll tell you how uncertain the world has become. If somebody asks to make a plan with you to go for a 1 day or a day trip or even, for a movie or whatever, and says, today we are the 6th, let's plan for this weekend. You possibly can plan in the scenario today. But if somebody says, tell me, in 3 weekends from now, can we do this? Suddenly in this COVID environment, nobody can plan for 3 weekends from now.
Yep, definitely, sir. Yeah.
Right? So your planning horizon itself has reduced. It was a very normal thing, and I'm sure you can correlate with it in your own families. Listeners can also, that if you're planning for a vacation, the planning could start, 3 months in advance, 2 months in advance. Especially if you're taking I like to ride motorcycles a lot, and every motorcycle riding sort of plan in India within the country would normally start about 2 to 3 months in advance. And one could plan that, okay, that holiday, Easter holidays, I'll go on. Today you can't plan for more than 10 days because you don't know what's going to happen. But Maharashtra will close down, curfew will happen, second lockdown will happen. You don't know. So when you're operating in an environment of uncertainty, you have to learn how to plan for multiple options happening. Like the example I gave you, which is that one garment which you will carry, which can serve you in the rain. Okay, maybe it has to be a Gore-Tex, which is waterproof also. And it has an inner layer that I can wear, which will make it warmer or whatever. So you have to do this multiple outs from a situation, which is a very different kind of a mindset training than saying I need more information to be able to make a concrete plan. Now, in a world where more information is not available, the best analytic person who can make the best plan with all the data available to him is useless because all the data is not available.
Right.
So it's a different kind of a mindset training, and
right.
Again, that's not exclusive to the army.
Right.
There are many professions which require medicine requires very similar training where you have multiple. You have to do a diagnosis and you have to find multiple outs.
Right.
Creative fields where you have to articulate an idea in a very different way, in a differentiated way. All of this requires the ability to plan solutions without having complete information.
Right. No, you're pretty bang on, sir, in terms of, the planning horizon. It's like 2 days or maximum 7 days. Uske baad to you cannot even think कि आगे क्या होगा. Naya strain aa jayega and you will all be back to homes. So I'm going to ask you a very different question. It's nowhere written in an email or plan. Because, in my limited experience, I think this is my first experience of being so up close and personal with somebody from an armed forces or uniformed forces. But I have had some acquaintances, of always meeting with friends or somebody from their family or something like that. A lot of these armed forces people I've met, they're all very independent, I never got a feeling from anybody that they're sheltered or they have been abroad like sheltered people, They're always ready to kind of take on challenges. और वही जैसे आपने बताया ना कि अभी uncertainty आगे के चीजें पता नहीं है, so there's always uncertainty in life, so they're always, it looks like they'll be happily be able to tackle that, right? वो mental state उनका थोड़ा हमेशा different रहता है. Compared to even from our family, normal folks, there is always this shelter coming from either parents or something. Ki acha kuch hoga, so I'm there, to fall back on. If you run out of money or if there's a small medical emergency, you can always call your dad or mom. Abhi, lekin if you're training in an armed forces, you'll not be able to immediately call your dad ki aaj पैर टूट गया during training or something like that. So how does it come along? वो कैसे होता है?
First of all, you have to understand that, the moment you join the forces, you have joined the largest family of the country. You have joined the first question you will be asked, if anywhere you meet any officer, he'll ask you, which platoon are you? Which unit are you? You say, I'm from 22 Meg. Okay, I am my postmate. The link will straight up, right? So it's one of the strongest families. Matter of fact, I would strongly recommend that any person who feels that they are lonely or they are in the army is the place to go, because that is one of the strongest bonds. The day you pass out from the academy, you have 500 brothers. It's the code of honor that I'll give you an example. So when I was working with Reliance, before Shardul, I had another EA for whom the instructions were very clear. The first priority in case somebody needs to see me will be a postmate's child. Because any child of a postmate of mine who's floating around in Bombay, if they need any help, they can just call me up. Even if her father or his father and I have not even met in the academy. It's possible because 500 cadets. So if you're in different companies in the academy, you may have just known each other by name. All the person has to say is, I'm so-and-so's son. Who's your postmate? That's it. And they get top prize. So it's a very, very strong family that extends not just into the officers, but their families, their children. I am, for example, local guardian to at least 5 or 6 army brats here in Bombay.
Right.
A different question that I'm only local guardian when they want to stay out late night, then they'll call me. We are staying with you. I say, okay, fine. But Be that as it may, that's the kind of a bond that is established. So that is not true. That it's a very, very strong family. The second part, which is more interesting, is I'll give this to you with an example. So, for example, you might be aware that the army is called out for aid to civil authorities whenever there is a natural disaster.
Right.
So when there is an earthquake, when there is flooding, when there is even when a child sometimes fall inside a borewell, you would have heard the army ko bulaya, army pulled the child out. Now, nowhere in our training are we taught how to take a child out of a borewell. We are not taught how to handle earthquake or famine or even what happened in Surat with that plague and all of that. I mean, it's not taught. We don't get that training, but we know how to solve a problem.
Right.
We know that given the resources that are given to us within this short time frame, we will build a bridge in 24 hours to make sure that the nation is not humiliated 24 hours before the national Commonwealth Games or whatever. Now, that ability of problem solving is what is taught. It is not that this is the problem to be solved. This is the framework to solve any problem. So you're taught several mental models and several frameworks in which you can exercise ingenuity, resourcefulness, local resources, improvisation with local stuff. Well, in a way, fortunately or unfortunately, war does teach human beings the most about technology.
Right.
So, and management principles, that's the reality. So most of the technologies that you're using right now, most of this cutting edge, bleeding edge technology is actually developed for defense, for war. Whether it's the laser, sonar, radar, commercial aircraft, internet that you're using right now has been designed. Original design was to provide resilient communication during a nuclear strike. So all of this have kind of originated: the nuclear bomb, the nuclear power, solar, space travel, satellites, communication. Most of it has come from a war requirement, not a peace requirement.
Right.
So to that extent, human beings become most ingenious when they have to fight for existential survival. That's why you see terrorists also. I mean, the LTT famously created this whole concept of the IED,
right?
An improvised explosive device, which then was their gift to the world of terror. And very, very powerful bombs that can take out a tank can be designed with using fertilizers and other stuff that is fairly easily available. So to that extent, ingenuity of trying to solve problems is what I think a lot of the emphasis of the environment in the armed forces is. So in that environment, therefore, it becomes, to answer your point, firstly, it is a big family. Right. And secondly, there is a confidence that we will solve this problem. We'll figure out a way to do this. Because in the past, there have been several problems that seemed not to have any solution, but which were solved. So if they were solved, that gives the confidence to that unit, to that subunit, to that officer also. That we'll find a way to do this.
Right. So to latch on to the same questions a little bit is, I mean, how can it's very I would say subjective kind of thing, but how can civilians incorporate this kind of ingenuity and mentality? Ki abhi aayega to dekhenge. I mean, that is.
No, I don't think this is a prerogative of any profession. I think their ingenuity is there in everybody. Is there in. I mean, why do you say civilians or army? I always look at it this way. I mean, there's a way to understand this.
Okay.
Majority of India. The people around us, the people who are serving you tea, coffee, or looking after your car, parking, washing, and they are all managing under 20,000 rupees a month. Right. So, zyada ingenuity kya hoga? That in 20,000 rupees a month, he has to bring up 2 children, get them educated in an English medium school also, has to take a loan to try and build a house, has to pay his monthly rent. Then whenever water pours in, water enters the Dharavi slums until they're waist deep. Literally a day-to-day battle is being fought. If one child has dengue, 6 months savings go away in one go. Right? So dengue ka injection for that child and your child is exactly the same. It's not different. Milk costs the same to you and same to him. So there are certain expenses which are standard expenses, which don't vary according to the income. So I don't think that any one profession can say ingenuity to sirf hamare paas hai, out of the box thinking hamare paas. That's not true. I mean, I don't know what word to use, but I'm always stunned whenever there's a. Abhi Bangalore mein hua tha na, piche baad aayi thi, barish aayi thi, and all of that stuff. Ek saal pehle, it was raining. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Did you ever wonder where do these homeless people go? Where do they go? When it is like 24 hours, pouring rain, where do they go?
Right.
Right. Now, so again, the point I'm trying to emphasize is that ingenuity and out-of-the-box thinking, firstly, is not the prerogative of any one profession.
Right.
I would say civilian versus army, something like that. Having said that, any environment which creates constraints will naturally breed a lot of ingenuity.
Okay.
When there are constraints, then there will be ingenuity that will come out to surmount that constraint.
Right.
And so therefore, I actually attribute the ingenuity and the innovation and out-of-the-box thinking which comes in the forces or in any other profession more to the constraints that were imposed. And therefore, the human mind is trying to get out of that constraint. Rather than thinking that there is some breed of people who are somehow more better out-of-the-box thinking. And that's not true. That's definitely not true. Matter of fact, armies, I'm not talking about the Indian army because we fortunately or unfortunately never had that luxury, but armies which have seen peace for a long periods of time, they actually become fairly, lethargic in ingenuity and lethargic in innovation because there is really no competition. This was actually very clearly demonstrated by the US or the US. It happened to the US because up to the time the Soviet Union was strong, the CIA and its technical counterparts and all of them, they had to match with the Soviets.
Right.
But the moment the Soviet threat went away, they were really the only big boy in town, and they had no need of innovation, no need to, get into the internet surveillance and all of that until 9/11 happened. When 9/11 happened, they were blindsided because they were stunned. And then they had to go and build those intelligence surveillance networks and all of that stuff. So the Air Force has a great saying. They say that to build a great plane, you must have a great enemy. So the point is that any environment, any work environment, it could be work, it could be home, which has constraints imposed on it, you'll find ingenuity will arise in that environment.
Makes sense. I know, of course. I mean, as necessity is the mother of all invention. So greater the enemy, greater the, aeroplane. You're right. I totally agree with that. Just quickly moving back to something which is very, I would say, grounded questions, because I think a lot of people are interested. Are there any dietary restrictions while you're training for armed forces, or it's just like because you work so hard during those days that everything and anything can go?
No, sorry, sir, I didn't get the question. What was that?
So let's say when you're training to become an armed personnel, for the armed forces training, military or army or navy or air force, are there any restrictions in what kind of food you can intake or anything of that sort, or because you work so hard that anything?
Really. I think when you are under training, for example, in NDA, technically smoking is not allowed. And when you go to the Indian Military Academy, drinking is not allowed during the training. These are basic restrictions. But other than that, there is really no restriction in terms of, it's a very healthy diet. They make sure you get your required calories and all of that. But other than that, it's completely your accountability for your physical health, because every day in the morning you have PT if you are at the Paltan. Every month there is a physical test. Every quarter there is a physical test, and every year there is a full spectrum medical checkup and physical test. So if you're not in what we call shape 1, SHAPE, shape stands for skeletal, heart, all the various systems of the body. They all need to be in shape 1. You will be classified as a low medical category. So one moment you become a low medical category, then automatically a lot of your career growth goes out of the window. So it is personal accountability. I think people decide what restrictions they impose on themselves.
So what did a day?
I would call it restriction. I would call it moderation. Moderation.
Yeah, of course. What did a day in life look like for you, sir? When you were still, kind of in the army. When you were still wearing uniform, basically.
So it again varies. I don't want to give a generic day. Day in training is very different. For example, when you're a cadet, whether you're in the Indian Military Academy or in the National Defense Academy or OT or any one of the training establishments, basically your day starts pretty early. It will start with typically PT. And immediately followed up with 1 hour of drill, or vice versa. Sometimes it will be drill and sometimes it will be PT. Whatever. The first 2 hours of the day will be fairly intense physical exercises. You get about an hour for breakfast and getting ready and all of that. And then from about, I would say, 9-ish to about 1:30, you have classes. There's academics that happens. Some of these academics are classroom classes. Some will be in the field. Some will be on visits to different units where you'll be shown different armaments. There'll be lecture demonstrations which will be shown and all of that stuff. And after 1:30, you normally have lunch. Then you get a break for maybe about an hour or so. Then games start at around 3:30. Then you have games till about, can continue depending on the environment at that point of time. If there's a major event happening like cross country or something, there'll be continuous practice for that. So your day is kind of chock-a-block with physical and academic activities, extra recreation. You have to go for horse riding, for swimming, for you have to play sports. Then of course there are movie days in a week, 2-3 days when movies are shown. So there's recreation. There is a lot of stuff like debates and social events. So a lot of these things happen. So it's a very, very chock-a-block 18 months. Chock-a-block 18 months, right? Once you join the unit, then it largely depends on where your unit is. So if you are deployed in a field location, then obviously you will be sent out to, if you're a young officer, you'll be usually manning one of the furthermost posts, or the one that is right there in the front and all of that stuff, which means the routine will depend on which location you are. So if you're in a location like Siachen, for example, then the routine is very different from a situation in the Rajasthan LOC.
Right.
But or if you're in Kashmir, then road opening parties will be going out, and so it depends on the location of the unit and also the function of the unit. So if you're in Army Aviation, for example, then your functioning will be very difficult. You'll be getting up 4 o'clock in the morning for your early morning flights that have to go out and all of that stuff. But suffices to say that it's a busy life. It's a life that is packed with a lot of physical activity. It's a life packed with a lot of travel, a lot of adventure, a lot of new things. It has its share of monotony as well. It's not like every day is a very exciting day and all of that stuff. Sometimes there is monotony for weeks together when you are waiting for something to happen, or field firing range and you're waiting for the trains to take you back, or you are and then of course a typical career of an officer is interspersed with 3 things. So there will be unit service, where he'll be working in the unit, his battalion. There will be training for which the officer will go. So officers will constantly keep going for training. It's actually probably, if you look the total career that an officer spends in the army and the total amount of training courses that they undergo during that, it probably would be one of the professions with the highest amount of structured training.
Okay.
So as you pass out of the academy as a lieutenant, you join your unit, and within a year or so, you go for what is called a young officers course. So think of the Indian Military Academy as an academy which trains everybody on all disciplines. Think of it as a generic MBA. So everyone is taught finance, marketing, is that, all of that stuff. And then you are transferred to the marketing division. So let's say you're commissioned into the infantry. So then you will go to the infantry school in Mau to do a young officers course on infantry. If you are commissioned into artillery, you will go to Devlali and do something on artillery. If you are in the armored corps, you'll go to Ahmednagar. Now, these schools will train those people in a discipline which is very, very specific to the arm that they have joined.
Right.
Then after the young officers course, you go back to your unit. Typically, you will go for another course after about 2-3 years, maybe about 5 to 6 years of service. You will go for a junior command. Then you'll go for a senior command, then higher command, then national defense. So there are continuous interventions that will keep happening in terms of training. So it's a fairly busy life. As you're probably aware, it also is transferable every 2 to 3 years. You'll be in a different station. You'll be in unit, you will be in training, and you will be in staff. Staff is where you are managing the headquarters, or helping in managing the headquarters and getting a sense of how headquarters work. What happens in army headquarters, what happens in training establishments. So these are all staff appointments. So that's a holistic view of the forces.
The day in their life. I want to ask something. I mean, again, because, as I don't want to use word civilian again, because you said, so as people, let's say, as regular folks, we go to running, let's say, kabhi main 21K kar raha hu, if I'm going to gym to work out really hard, and I'm sure there are like thousands, probably millions like me. We go with this attitude ki aaj to matlab, today we have to kind of kill it. Matlab ekdam aaj to for dena hai. We have to really conquer ourselves by running 42K or something. But I can only imagine what the mental state would be of people who are actually there in the war fields sometimes. I mean, I'm really curious to learn. So when real bullets are coming from the other side and real artilleries and bombing is happening, what is the mental state of people in those fields? Like, how do they manage to stay calm and kind of keep at their jobs without failing?
I see this is actually a very hard question to answer because the response to any kind of a dangerous situation or a life-threatening situation is very personal. It varies between people to people. There are people who are not scared at all, very few though. Most people are scared, but they control their fear. And how they respond to a situation of imminent physical danger to themselves is, but the thing is that with so much of training that has been done, a large part of it is muscle memory.
Okay.
So you have been trained so many times that when you have effective fire coming on you, you dash, down, crawl, and return fire. So dash means dash, you'll run, you will go down, and you will crawl away from the place where you have dashed down, and then you will return fire. Now, this drill has been sort of put in and drilled so many times that the first 10, 20, 30 seconds, which is called like the golden seconds or whatever you want to call it, which in time of any crisis, how do you respond in the first 30 seconds? The first 30 seconds response is almost muscle memory. And it also becomes organizational memory. So a subunit, a patrol, when it comes under fire, how they will react as a team, it's already been drilled several times.
Okay.
So I think one of the best antidotes to any sort of fear is action. When you're afraid, if you take action, it usually erodes the fear a little bit. So if you have been trained, if SOPs have been put in place to immediately launch into some sort of an action at the first sign of danger or a first sign of imminent threat, then it gives you a sense of agency that at least I'm doing something to handle it.
Right.
You're doing something to, sort of handle it. So it's a bit like you have one sense of fear if you're the co-passenger in a car and you see a truck hurtling towards you. And another sense of fear if you're the driver. But as a driver, you have agency. You have agency to be able to swerve the vehicle out. Now, if you have been trained that if a vehicle is coming this way, you slam the brakes and swerve. I mean, maybe instinctive. You won't even think about it. Then those moments of fear also, you'll be acting in those moments of fear. You'll be doing some action. You'll not be paralyzed like this. You'll not be in a state of, a deer caught in a headlight kind of a situation. Because inaction is usually much, much worse than any form of action, even if it is sometimes not absolutely the right thing to do, but at least some harkat is happening. So I think that's the way people think. And again, I don't want to, I keep stressing this. I think, one of the purposes that I'm doing this conversation with you is to keep underscoring the fact that the armed forces are part of our society only. They are not, don't import them from Denmark or New York. They are, from the same. Many of your classmates must be in the forces, and I'm sure each one of our listeners here, by 1 degree of separation, knows somebody in the forces, and he knows he's an ordinary guy, like us only.
Correct.
So, in other words, what I'm trying to say is that the core essential fiber of those elements is present in all of us. Yeah, we are all, used to having some sort of a crisis or some sort of a danger. In that profession, it is much more structured, much more trained, much more drilled into you, because that is the profession you are in. It's like if you have a paramedic, instinctively the paramedic will look at your hands where the veins are. That's the way a paramedic will look at it. If you're a chiropractor, instinctively you'll notice if someone's feet are sort of has got a tilt to one side. So similarly in the forces, because that is the profession, there is an instinctive or intuitive or a drilled in methodology by which people look at situations and figure out what can go wrong and how that can be fixed. That's the essence of it.
Yeah, I think you mentioned in the beginning as well, the mental models that have been trained through variety of practices and drills. I think that is so deeply ingrained because of the daily activities that the muscle memory develops. And people act even in the situation of danger. I think that's what my understanding is, and I think I definitely agree on that, sir. One thing also which I'm really curious about, sir, is we have always heard, or at least seen in the movies and the pop culture, is the leadership style which goes in the armed personals or in the armed forces. It's very intense. I'm not sure if that's the right word, or maybe authoritarian, maybe a little bit. So, is there a difference between how people lead people into a war or into any other situation in the armed forces versus how it happens outside in the corporate world or somewhere else like that?
So, 2-3 layers to your question. Firstly, movies are meant for entertainment; they're not meant for education.
Correct.
So, should not miss the line between the two. And usually in entertainment, the entertainment features are much more about combat, Saving Private Ryan, the actual shooting and all of that. And therefore, the leadership traits that are demonstrated there are far more tactical traits. In tactical leadership, you do need a leader who will lead from the front, who say, let's climb up and we'll do this and we'll make it happen. Because you need a lot more of Josh. You need a lot more of high fervor. At operational levels, you need a lot more coordination. You need a lot more collaboration. And there, if you have this, I specialist, ki main thok dunga, main kar dunga, ye kar dunga, then very likely that he will alienate his other comrades. Maybe somebody is from signals, maybe someone is from artillery, maybe someone is from the services corps, from ordnance corps. The entire group has to work together as a team. And each one has to feel that I am equally essential to this entire operation. So in operational leadership, you need far more of the ability to make people collaborate, the ability to make people see the picture, the same picture, and to give their, more than their 110%, or more than their 100% in each, even though they may not be in synchronization with the idea. It's not my idea, but I still need to give my 100%. How do you get people to collaborate? That's a different kind of leadership. At the strategic level, it's much more about restraint. It's much more about giving a measured response. It's much more about saying, okay, fine, we have been struck in this place. If we have to give a very strong message, maybe we won't strike there. Maybe we'll strike somewhere else. So at that tactical level, it may seem, humne to kuch nahi kiya, but at a strategic level, something else may be happening. So that requires having the big picture. That requires tempering your intuitive need to hit back immediately. So a very different style of leadership. Both require bravery, by the way. You require bravery to rush into combat, and you require bravery to hold your fire also, to say, don't escalate. Wait. Let's see what happens. So bravery is there in both. But the former bravery is much more cinematographic. Because the guy jumps over a trench and but he throws a grenade and bayonets up. Very visual. So that's what is captured in the movies. And therefore leads to a belief that all leadership in the army is like that. It's not like that. There is this tactical leadership where bravery and the sheer foolhardy courage, raw courage is what is required at times. At strategic level, you don't need foolhardiness. You don't need recklessness there. There you have to have very, very tempered, measured, restrained kind of decision making. So that's the way to understand decision. And by the way, this is not true in the forces. It's true everywhere.
Correct.
It's true. If you're a frontline marketing guy, you can demonstrate that, Joe, madam, aapke liye main 20% discount. If you're the head of marketing, you cannot be throwing a 20% discount because that has implications all across the board and all of those kind of things. So we must not confuse what we see in entertainment as the format of education. These are two different things.
Correct. So, what I'm understanding is no matter what the situation is and no matter what the profession is, even including the armed forces, the leadership style is always going to be always strategic, much tempered. And of course, the calls have to be taken based on the...
Leadership styles have to change depending on which levels you're leading at. If you're leading at tactical levels, I'll give you an example so that will correlate more with the corporate world. You will understand perhaps in a different way. All companies, including yours, each and every company, and matter of fact, each and every division within each and every company has to fall in one of these 4 stages. It has to be either a startup, or it has to be a turnaround, or it has to be realignment, or it has to be a steady state company. right? Startup is like your company is a startup. Realignment could be something like Bajaj deciding that we are not going to make scooters anymore. Intel deciding we are not going to make motherboards anymore. We'll make only processors. Or at some point Kodak deciding कि चलो भाई film बंद कर देते हैं, we'll do something else. That's a realignment. Turnaround is a company that has gone down. Apple was a famous story in which Steve Jobs was brought back in to turn it around. GE, you have a great story, or Lee Iacocca's story of making IBM dance and all of that stuff. Steady state is like Apple, doing well, most profitable company in the world and all of that. Now, all of these four require different leadership styles. In a startup, you really don't have clarity. You don't have clarity. I can guarantee you, how old is your startup?
We are like all near about 2 years old, sir. Now.
You can take it from writing in me right now. That 5 years down the line, not even 5, 3 years down the line, when we are 5 years old, what you will be very different from what you have envisioned.
Correct.
Right? Situation will change. Suddenly, people are not exercising. More of them are doing yoga at home. Suddenly, your apparel has to change because of that. Whatever. There could be incredible number of reasons. So, at a startup stage, the decision making has to be much more in terms of ready, fire, aim.
Right.
Ready, fire, aim करेंगे. We'll see. आगे जाके देखेंगे. Right now, we need production capability. आगे जाके देखेंगे whether it will be this line or that line, and we'll start with this or whatever. So it has to be a lot of optimism being brought in, but not too much of clarity.
Right.
If you're in a turnaround, you have to very clearly indicate that there is a new leader in town. And usually that is done by, I remember this story. There was a incident in the army where the unit had gone bad. So sometimes units go bad and they send a new CO to sort out that unit. And the new CO came and immediately told the Subedar Major कि इस पलटन में PT कितने बजे होता है? जैसे साहब 6 बजे होता है सुबह, कल सुबह से 5:30 बजे हो. गेम्स कितने बजे होता है? साहब 4 से लेके 5 बजे तक. तो कल से 4 से लेके 6 बजे तक होगा. कल से क्यों? आज शाम से. एंड मंदिर परेड कब होता है? तो साहब मंदिर परेड साहब शनिवार को होता है, तो इतवार को होगा इस हफ्ते से. So he passes 3 arbitrary orders, and all the 3 orders are harsh orders because he's preponed the time of PT, extended the time of games, and one day, Sunday, that was normally a completely free day has now become a Mandir parade. Mandir is also a parade in the army. You have to attend it. So you would wonder, why has he done it? Why has he passed 3 arbitrary, harsh orders? Now, he is leading an organization which is a turnaround. So he has to announce that there is a new sheriff in town. And he will pass these 3 instructions which are harsh and then relent on it as the unit starts becoming better and better. He starts relenting on it a little bit by little bit. Very different style of leadership. Now, if you're in a steady state organization, which organization has been doing exceedingly well, Pulton has been winning accolades, and there if you go and pass these 3 arbitrary orders, the guys get confused. What's wrong with you? Why are you doing this? So similarly, if you're taking over an organization which is running in a steady state, you have to study it for 6 to 8 months, 9 months before you start making tiny changes, because each change may have an implication somewhere else.
Yeah.
Right? Like at one point of time, I was running a company called Mahindra Special Services Group. It was a consulting firm. If I bid for raising the salary of my consultants, which was any CEO would want to do that, because otherwise his attrition is increasing, because my competitors are poaching from me. And one of the reasons why they're poaching is they're giving higher salaries. So if I go to my sector president and say, I need to increase the salaries of my IT professionals, my consultants, and I have the money to do it, I have my P&L, allows it. The sector president has to think of the implication on Tech Mahindra, on implication on Satyam, that if it's allowed in one IT company, will we not have a problem in the other? Right now, this IT company may have just 100 employees. Those have 10,000 employees. So here, if you do a 10% raise, there a 10% raise can alter those. So now, what is at a tactical and an operational level, the decision of a CEO, at a sector president level, it becomes a bad decision. So this understanding, the ability to understand and place yourselves in different frames of reference, in some sense, is, I think, the crux of
how the leadership.
How leadership has to change in different situations.
That was very relatable, sir, because as you mentioned, I mean, we are 2 years old. We are pretty young right now, and there have been decisions which we had to make in a very jiffy manner and then run with it, right? So, for example, during COVID, we literally went down to 0% and had to recover from that with some product innovations. And with like I have a really kick-ass team behind me, honestly speaking. So otherwise, I wouldn't be here. With that kick-ass team in place, we managed to bring our production. Earlier, we used to produce in Sri Lanka, but we managed to move entire production in the last 6 months to India. So now we are a properly homegrown, 100% local brand, which has kind of been a very, very pride-worthy tag for us as Indian startup, because we are going on and taking a head on the international brands. Anyways, so just one last, I'm sure you we are kind of short of time. It's more than an hour. Last couple of things, sir, is one, I mean, it's a very generic question, but I just want to cover it because a lot of listeners, is what advice would you be having for people, let's say, who are willing or who are looking to join armed forces? Do you have any like top 3 advice or top 5 or anything that you want to tell them, who are interested in looking at that part of life?
I think if you're genuinely interested, you will find avenues and sources to get more information, and you will have a better understanding. There are many ways to do it. There are websites which give information. I'm sure in every place you stay, there'll be, if you just make some inquiry, you'll find some retired officers living in your vicinity, especially in Bangalore. Bangalore is a base for all cities. All cities you will find. Go over to them, talk to them, find out more about it. You'll meet all sorts of people. Some you will meet will be cynical, some will be take, all those kinds. So try and understand it better. Like any profession, if you were to join the medicine industry, wouldn't you talk to some doctors and some uncle who's a doctor? If you want to become a lawyer, you'll talk to some people who know. So that's one way to do it. I mean, I get a lot of messages which come to me in my Twitter direct message. Tell me how to join the army. I often want to tell the guy, don't bother it. I mean, if you can't figure out which are the exams that come, what is the eligibility for it, and all of that, you cannot go to second base. So I think there has to be a high degree of curiosity. And again, all these principles that I'm talking about are not limited only to the army. You want to excel in anything, you take your very business that you're doing now. You're getting into apparels and you're getting into sports apparel. You better be really, really curious about what technologies are coming on Nike Air. What is this happening? What is this... what's it called, pronation, and how can I build shoes which have got pronation support, and this. You have to be really, really passionately curious about it to do well. Right. Varna jute ka dukaan mein to Bata mein bhi naukri mil jayega. That's not the point.
Indeed.
Point is that if you want to do well in any profession, even to join the profession, you have to be very, very curious, and you have to be curious about understanding the whole landscape. Not that maine jaake border dekh liya and I will join the army. That way, though, you should see, Top Gun and join the Air Force, or see, any one of the movies.
Watch Harry Potter and join that magic school.
Magic school. So I think it's much more about finding out the entire aspect of it. It is a very, very simple process. There are exams held twice in a year. Those exams are very simple, objective type exams. Of course, my knowledge is dated, but I'm reasonably sure that this is the situation even now. You appear for the written exam. There is a cutoff. After that, you're called for an interview. That interview is a 3 to 5 days process, which also has an element of your physical testing. And at the end of it, there is a selection. Out of a batch of about 40, 45, about 2 or 3 are selected, sometimes 4 or 5. Sometimes the entire batch is washed out. And then you are given, I think, a 3-month gap. And after that, you join the academy. And then, depending on which academy you've joined, if you've joined the NDA, then you have options of Air Force, Navy, Army. If you join the Indian Military Academy, then it is the Army, obviously. If you join the Naval Academy, then there are other entries, also technical entries. This is entries for people who have already done their engineering, or medical entries for people who are already doctors. Then they join laterally. They, of course, go through a training, but they step up on rank in seniority when they join the Army. The antedate seniority is given to them. And so it's a fairly straightforward process. There's no mystery to it, actually.
Okay, so that sounds interesting. I'm sure people will be keen on finding out more by themselves. And as you said, I mean, if you cannot find out kaun sa exam dena hai, then
many years ago, I'll tell you this anecdote. Many years ago, I was part of a committee in Mahindra, which was set up for evaluating new businesses. Like you go to, I'm sure you must have gone to many of these VCs. So those days, this was when the express highway was not built. And those were the heady days of .com, where CEOs used to fly from Bombay to Pune also. They'll fly. They will not, So this committee, we had given a schedule for this company from Pune to come and present to us at 9 o'clock the next day. And there were 3 days, 1 day, 2 day, 3. So they were on day 1 and they were asked to come. And they requested that can we be postponed to day 2? So I asked, why would they ask? So he said, ticket nahi mila, flight ka. So I rejected them there itself. And a lot of people ask me, but it's a great idea. Why are you not looking at it? I said, a founder who cannot manage to reach from Pune to Bombay.
I mean,
मतलब मेरे को अगर कोई बोले कि वो आनंद महिंद्रा मिलना चाहते हैं, मैं तो साला ट्रक के अंदर बैठ के आ जाऊंगा. अगर if I have that I will figure out Bombay to Pune. Yeah, but a guy can get on a scooter and get over here if he wants to. If he doesn't want to, doesn't have that what I call rigor, then the guy is not going to amount to any much anyways. Because no matter what idea you have, no matter what education you have, both of these combined cannot beat rigor and passion. So if somebody is passionate and rigorous, that person will always win over a person who may even be talented and blessed and have all the resources. So that's the benchmark I use. So all those people who want to join the forces and are genuinely wanting to join the forces, by now they know website कहाँ है, वो CDS का exam कब होता है, 2-4 कुंजी भी ले लिया होगा, coaching class भी join कर लिया होगा to find out okay what are the kind of questions that are there. They would have asked people who have cleared the exam, कैसे किया भाई क्या है. They would have done all of that. Those who want to join because they just seen a movie will say, अच्छा ये कौन है, कैसा है यार, so इसको message भेजता हूँ मैं, कैसे join करते हैं. I have not opened a recruitment center here, so I can't help the person in terms of joining. So I think it very clearly shows which direction they are in. I'm pretty sure that all your serious listeners who want to join the forces just have to Google and they will find enough information about how to join. I'll give you a tip over here, which you might want to put out, that when I was in Reliance, because we had many armed forces officers there, we created a series called Cracking the SSB. So if you just go to YouTube and put Reliance GCS, one word, and SSB, you will find the whole series of films that were made, which tell a person how to clear the SSB. What's the kind of questions they're asked, what's the kind of behavior you need to demonstrate, or what are the behavior they're looking for, not what you have to demonstrate, what is it that they're looking for. So I'm sure there are many such forums. And
Yeah, correct, sir. That reminds me of something. I mean, I just want to put it out there before asking you the last question. So, we're a very young company. We are like team of 10. We have our own internal documents, that where we kind of keep referring to. And in all that, we mention it in the bottom that, a team of accountable people will beat a team of talented people 10 out of 10 times. So as you said, the rigor is definitely something which is needed, much needed than over anything else. No matter how much talent is there, but unless the rigor is there, it cannot happen. That brings me to the last thing.
But the rigor will not come by just writing it in the paper. That also you have to remember.
Thank you. Thanks, sir. Thanks for reminding that. Definitely. And sir, last question is the most cliched question ever that anybody would have asked you, I think. How are you keeping yourself fit? Because I've seen your videos and it'll be a huge inspiration, I think, at least for my parents also. For my mom and everybody else, a lot of people, a lot of listeners is how are you keeping? Because I've seen your videos, you're very fit. You're full of energy. So how is it happening? What's the secret?
I'll tell you 2 secrets. First secret is something which I read a long time ago, where it says, in one of these holy books, it says, do what the priest tells you to do.
Okay.
Don't do what the priest does. Okay.
Yeah.
So first piece of advice is that instead of asking me, what is it that I do, you should possibly ask, what is it that you advise people to do? Because I may or may not do it. That's it. But that has no bearing on the advice per se. Right?
Yeah.
So don't smoke is good advice coming from a smoker also. Right? So you can't say, well, tu to pita hai, mere ko kya advice de raha hai? So don't do what the priest does. Do what the priest tells you to do. Or rather, I think if you find any one exercise and just stick to it, whatever that may be, and stick to it for a moderate amount of time. People who walk into the gym with a mindset that I've got to kill it, I'm going to kill it today, either they have to be preparing only for a physical sport,
Correct.
Right? मैंने bodybuilding करनी है, मैंने डोले बनाने हैं, whatever shit, whichever way you want to coin that. Then that is going with a kill. Otherwise, every physical exercise session that you do, you need to actually come back feeling I could have done a little bit more. I could have done a little bit more. Shit, yeah, I wanted to walk 1 more kilometer, run 1 more kilometer, and I stopped before that. Because only then it is sustainable. If it is not enjoyable, it is not going to be sustainable. If it becomes a drudgery, it is not going to be sustainable. So much better to find one exercise, whatever it may be. And I know in India, we have our own challenges. There aren't public places and all of that. So whether it's running, people in Delhi can't do running because of pollution. So you have to find whatever that one set of exercises or 2 sets or whatever, and just stick with it with a doable schedule. So if somebody says, I'm going to exercise 2 hours a day, every day, 360 days, it's not a doable schedule. Unless you're a career athlete or something like that.
Right.
But a doable schedule would be, I'll definitely do 30 minutes every day, but try to do an hour. And I'll try to do at least 2 times in a day. And I'll try to do A, B, C, D. And I'll try and fill up my calendar so it has more of tick marks and less of crosses. That, to my mind, is a much more sustainable piece. I also think travel is a great way to stay healthy. Not necessarily just from a physical point of view, but also from a mental point of view, because you're constantly learning new stuff, seeing new things. And travel, if you choose the right kind of travel, automatically affords some element of physical exercise. If you go to the mountains and you decide that if I'm staying there for 5 days, 3 days, I'll trek, or I'll do this, or I'll do that, or whatever. I think those are the ways in which you have to shape a physical fitness regime. And frankly, what works for Milind Suman may not work for me. Correct. What works for me may not work for you. Correct. Because our goals are very different. Our stations in life are very different. If you're 34, at the age of 34, the way I was exercising is not the way I'll exercise now. Why would I do that? At that point of time, my requirements were very different from a physical fitness point of view. My requirements now are very different. So I think the principles I would say is find something that you can do on a sustained basis and measure it so that you have a feedback mechanism which shows you whether you're on track or not. And by and large, I think you'll be okay. Baki, I mean, I'm not saying it in a negative sense to you, but I've seen people who have this Fitbit and this and that. And, in my previous building where I used to live, there used to be a guy who used to go cycling. And he's in Prabhadevi. From Prabhadevi, he'll probably go up to this... max, he'll go up to Nariman Point, and uske liye wo GPS वगैरह लगा के जाता था. So as if, he's going on a... So I think those, we must remember those are distractions. They are activity being confused as progress. So correct. I think that's
I think, yeah, I mean, just in defense of I think everybody goes through a journey, progression. I'm sure he will get to a point where he'll see कि Fitbit is far less important than the distance he covers and the mind or thakan wakan jo bhi hogi.
What I'm saying is we must remember that Fitbits and these kind of tools and buying a better pair of shoes and buying a better sweat-free apparel it's an additive. Definitely. It's not a substitution.
Right. We totally agree on that, sir. And that's exactly the principle that we have kind of ingrained. And I'm not trying to kind of promote it here, but you just to kind of add a little bit, we never actually go ahead and ask our people to kind of repeatedly buy from us. Instead, we just make few products. And that's why we are not like SKU heavy company. We don't make like 1,000 t-shirts, 1,000 shorts. We make like 5 t-shirts and 4 shorts. And people use it for the year, I mean, they buy it, they find so much value in the products that they kind of keep using it. My last short from my own brand from Zimmerat, I have been using the same shirt for the last 2 years and it's still running well. And now we are launching some new products, so we'll be buying it again. Anyways, thanks a lot, Raghu sir. I mean, you took so much time, I think almost 1 hour, 20 minutes. That was incredible. So much fun speaking with you, so much learning and so much value. Mansi, you have anything that you want to speak to Raghu sir as well?
Hi, sir. Thank you for making time for us. And I'm sure this session is going to be really valuable for all our users and customers. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you, Mansi. Look forward to meeting up with you guys soon whenever travel.
Yes, sir, I would love to be in touch with you, sir, with your permission, or email or whatever the best communication medium is.
We'll do that. Thanks, Siddharth. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
All right, sir. Bye.